Angel, if you're ready, I'll switch screens and make you presenter.
Sure.
All right. Everyone enjoy your webinar.
All right. Let me know if you can see me, and then I'll go.
Yep, I can see you're connected to GoToWebinar screen.
All right, great. Oh, there's my inbox. Everybody can see it. All right, everybody. Well, hey, welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming into my session here today. My name's Angel Abundez. I'm VP of Business Intelligence at DesignMind. DesignMind is a Microsoft Gold partner headquartered in San Francisco. We service clients all across Northern California. We are partners with Microsoft as well as a couple other people that some of you on the session might know about, including Tableau, Cloudera, and Platfora. We have a big data practice, a SharePoint practice, SQL Server practice, and custom app dev practice. But my neck of the woods is BI. But I do have a heart for data analysts because that's how I started off, and that's where this session is really coming from. So hope you guys enjoy it, and want to go through, kind of peel the onion a little bit about what we're going to go through. So what I wanted to go through was who this talk was intended for. I wanted to be sure I clarified that because there might be some BI developers or BI administrators or even DBAs that might be watching, and the things that I'm about to cover may, the workflow or the process that I go through might feel a little odd in some respects. Again, this is for the data analyst, and I'll describe who that is and who I see that in each of the organizations. I'm going to go through an intro, and I should also mention to take the opportunity now to thank again Pragmatic Works and this entire program of Training on the T's for having me. There's a lot of awesome webinars that like Brian Knight and Devin Knight have presented on, for giving the breakdown, a much more detailed breakdown of all of the components in Power BI. There's going to be one of the tools I'm not going to cover very much of. I'm just going to skim the surface on, but I encourage you to check those out. Recently at our company, because Office 365 is being adopted so quickly, I think yesterday at the Worldwide Partner Conference they said something like 1 billion new subscribers have signed up, or I forget what the number was, but it's like it's a big spike in Office 365 adoption. So what that means for us and for companies like Pragmatic Works is that people have questions about how to set this up and what it really means, and what tools they should be using, what best practices are, what's available, what's not. There's a lot of stuff to keep up with. So there's some stuff that's come up in the field from our standpoint that I'd like to share with you guys, the data analysts, so that you guys, if you run into the same questions, I address them here. Followed by tips, not just in Power View, but I'm going to be covering tips throughout the session. I'm going to be focusing on visualization in a 5 to 10 minute segment, and then at the end, one of our principal data scientists would be joining me to talk about this new capability in Office 365, which is time series forecasting. So hope you guys like it. So here we go. So the data analyst. So here are the characteristics that I typically see when I go into a company, and somebody presents themselves as a business analyst or a process analyst or any type of analyst within a company. Typically in consulting engagement or in a data warehousing project, sometimes these people are referred to as subject matter experts, or they could be referred to as the stakeholders of the project. But the these are the people, the go-to people at every company that just, they know all about the data. They know where to go get answers if an ad hoc question comes through. If anybody creates a report, these people are very very sharp. When they look at those reports, they're able to tell right away if they're wrong, if they're right, if there's a brand new insight, or if there's additional things that should be researched before somebody calls, before somebody makes a judgment call for the business. So typically for DesignMind, where we see these folks is they are the ones that are validating our work. So us, we primarily do data warehousing, dashboard, report development, and ETL and all that, as many of you that are on the session might. But these people are the ones that really validate our data. So, you know, it's the QA people, but they're more than that, right? They represent the business, they represent the goals of the company, and they're in alignment with the strategy. So, you know, they're our customers. These people love data, they love business, and they appreciate tech. And that any given moment they can call out, you know, who's the important person to go to, or what's the key process here. So, you know, some data is actionable. In our day and age today, data is so important to organizations, and the right people, having the right people in place, hiring the right people makes a big difference to a company, and these data analysts really are the crux of the communication between their data and the business. So the way I kind of envision it is the data analyst is a center point for all communications throughout the company. Now, there might be different hierarchy of data analysts, but these people, you know, they go around to different departments, and you know, sometimes there's designated analysts in each department, but they all come through and focus to the central core of what a company's goals are, what their products are, what they stand for, where their vision is, what they're doing, and where they're headed. And I'd also like to add that these guys or gals are usually very personable, very friendly, very energetic. I love working with these people. So again, this session is for you, and I hope what we get out of it today is that you can go out and be working with these tools and try to figure out ways that they can help you guys in your daily work. Okay, so getting to the crux of it. So what is Power BI? Some of you guys that are on the session might not know, or might be new to that term. So Power BI really is 4 different tools that are now available inside of Excel. A couple of these tools are available in Excel 2010. That's Power Query and Power Pivot. But all 4 of them are available with the right version of Excel 2013. And I have some show notes that I'm planning to put on SlideShare. So if you guys have Twitter, or if you guys have LinkedIn, or if you guys are following the Pragmatic Works Training on the T's Twitter handle, I'll make sure to work with Rachel to make sure that the show notes get communicated to all of you. But I have links of you know, that you can go to reference what the right version of Excel is for you. But so you guys can read up on the details there, and I'm going to cover in detail each of these, with the exception of Power Map. Power Map is a 3D global visualization tool, which I'm not going to cover today because I just don't have enough time. There's so many other things that I think data analysts can leverage with Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View that they may not be already using today. That Power Map really is, there's some other great webinars on the Pragmatic Work website. But to summarize this all about what does what, Power Query is your data set. Power Query is a tool that a data analyst can use to create data sets, to shape data, to format data. If there's any queries or any flat files or any Excel spreadsheets that you constantly manipulate or constantly have to reformat all the time, you might want to take a look at this tool, because this tool not only can format the data, but it saves all the steps, and it makes it so that you just need to refresh it, and you don't have to do all of those steps anymore. Save you some time. Power Pivot, you may have heard of a lot already, or not, but Power Pivot, what it is, it's a data modeling tool. It's an analytical engine inside of Excel. You can import a lot of data into it, and as a matter of fact, you can go from Power Query to Power Pivot pretty easily, and I'll show you a little checkbox where that happens. And by doing so, what then you're able to leverage is a tool called Power View. Now, Power View also works with Excel tables, but best practice, as what I'm going to show you today, is to use Power Pivot. Reason being is that you can control, you have better control over what fields you're picking when you're creating a data visualization. And I'm cheating, and I'm using that term from Tableau. But it's a data visualization tool. It's very cool, very interactive. There's some things in it that Tableau doesn't have, like tiles, and it's easy to do maps now inside of Excel. So if you've never done maps inside of Excel and you have region data, I hope you guys are excited, because we're going to go through that today. And then I've already talked about Power Map, which I'm not really going to get too much into. But again, there's other webinars on the Training on the T's website, and I encourage you guys to go check it out if you're curious about what that looks and feels like. Okay, so what I've got a couple practical examples, one of which is my own. I'm going to use Power Query to do something that I do. It's to manage my personal budget inside of Quicken, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to switch over to using Power Query to scrape data off of the web. Again, Devin Knight and Brian Knight have done a fantastic job of showing just how powerful you can use Power Query to scrape data off of the internet. But I'm going to just do a quick example that ties into a visualization practice or example that I'm going to go together with you guys. I'm going to work together with you on. And then, of course, we got our good old AdventureWorks example company, where I'm going to take out Power Pivot, and I'm going to try to show you a good trick that I thought was good in terms of slicing by measures, so that you can dynamically switch out measures in a pivot table or a pivot chart, followed by some Power View stuff. So, okay, so let's get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a brand new Excel, workbook. And so now let me give you guys a scenario. So in Quicken is great for tracking expenses and great for tracking your income, and it's great for scheduling bills. But what it's not so great at is allowing you to see your forecast, like what your bills, like if you have bills 3 months out in front of you, what is your cash flow going to look like? So what I have to do, and maybe some of you on this webinar are a little bit better than me and figured out a way to do it in the tool. What I've done is I've created a dump of all of the bills that are in the future for me. Now, I'm just going to, this goes out to from March 2014, but let's just assume that this is the following month, the current month and the following months thereafter. But these are just exports of all the expenses and all the payments that I expect to come in. Again, flat files. I've got a header, I've got some weirdness going on. How am I supposed to put all of these files together? Now, I wanted to show this example particularly. I don't know if one of my clients, who I doubt is on this session right now, asked me like about 3 years ago, "Hey Angel, do you know of a way to concatenate a bunch of text files or CSV files or Excel files. I don't remember what he had, but at the time I was like, no, I don't. At that time, Power Query wasn't around, and I thought there was a quick and easy way, but there wasn't. And of course, me being the developer, I said, well, I could do it for you in SSIS, but he didn't need that. He just needed a quick and dirty. It was not going to be enterprisey. It wasn't going to be for enterprise consumption. It was just some weird, scenario that he just needed to consume some flat files. So, and of course, being a data analyst, he has to do it today, and it has a deadline, and he knows that he can do it somehow, some way. So I think he went off and did it with VBA, but today, now we can do this with Power Query. So with Power Query, what we can do, and it's one of my favorite features, we can load files from a folder. So all I have to do is pick the folder path where I have all my files. I have them here. And immediately you already start to get value from this tool. Now this is the query editor for Power Query, and you see I've got one row for every file that I had in that folder. Kind of a side note, what I have here is also the attributes. So what's interesting about what I'm seeing here is I have the data, I have information about the files that I'm able to import into Excel. If I had a question about when the dates were created or analyzed, if I had hundreds of files, I could just pull this in. If I had questions, other questions that pertain to the rest of the attributes, I've got a ton of other attributes I can expose in this data set. Again, I'm creating a data set. So I'm not doing that though. All I want to do is I want to combine these files. So how do I do it? So there's a couple different ways now with the latest version of Power Query. Power Query has this combine binaries button. And so every one of these binary links is the content of the text file itself. This link exists here, and it also exists here in the ribbon. Now this ribbon, for those of you who might have seen Power Query a year ago, this ribbon has been revamped and has got a lot more functionality added to it. And I think I might just skim the surface, but you guys will get the picture about how powerful this tool is. So I click on this column, and I'll click on this button, and instantly all the files in that folder are combined. Now, the other cool thing I can do is I can affect a lot of those imports at the same time. For instance, all these 5 first rows I don't need anymore, so I'm going to remove them. It's going to ask me how many do I want to remove. I want to remove the first 5. Great, but this is just one column. This is actually delimited file. So I know what this is delimited by, and it's delimited by tabs. So I can split this column, and there's a nice ribbon selection here for split the column, and I can say by number of characters, but today I'm going to do by delimiter. And there's other options, there's advanced options, but all I know is to do for my situation is select the tab as the delimiter. Okay, great. And also, these are not the column names I want to use. I have the first row, which is my header row, so I have it here available in the ribbon, or over here there's a cheat sheet right here where I can use the first row as the header row. Now, like Power Pivot, this tool, what's kind of a best practice, or you should get in the habit of doing, is going and updating the data type, because that gives you other flexibility in the rest of the tool set, like Power View, to utilize for further analysis later. So I'm going to just, you can do some multi-selects here by hitting the Shift key. I'm going to change this to a decimal number. I'm going to remove this column. And jobby job is not my real job. I'll just say I want to replace the values in this column from jobby job to paperboy. I used to be a paperboy when I was little, so let's just say I was a paperboy. Of course, I'm not making $2,500 as a paperboy a month or bi-weekly by far, but one of the things that I wanted to focus our attention on is over here in the applied steps. So every step that I just did is recorded inside of Power Query. Now, if for those of you that might be on the development side, these applied steps are actually each of them a piece of code inside of Power Query. And this code is referred to as the M language, M as in Mary. So if you take a look at this, and there's documentation out there, I believe now, and actually Chris Webb has just released a new book on Power Query, which is really good. I just got a copy of it. You can learn more about M and all the stuff that it can do, and it can do a lot. But for now, for me, I'm just a data analyst. I just needed to concatenate some files. And literally I can just accept this, but the other thing I want to focus our attention on is the rest of the data. Now I've got other stuff here that is junky, so I want to get rid of that stuff so I can actually cleanse my data a little bit here. I don't need to do it inside of Excel all manually or anything. There is a remove errors button here, so I can get rid of those. But then the other thing is that I've got nulls here in my dates, and I know since I'm looking at my expenses and payments, I need to get rid of those things, so I can just filter those out. Just easy like that. Okay. Now all of this has been in the query editor, and I want to name this query forecast and apply and close. When I apply and close it, it instantly brings it into my worksheet. But I do have the option, additionally, of loading this into my data model, or in other words, Power Pivot. But before I go there, the last thing I'm going to do is what I do personally for my personal budget, I like to do this where I have like my opening balance, and I will do, my opening balance plus the payments. Whoops. Opening balance plus, okay, can't type, plus payments plus deposits. Now it's plus because the payments are a negative. Okay. Now there's something wrong here. If any of you detect it, it's because it's instantly the way this is set up right now. I want this to constantly look back at the transaction before it. So I just have to change this to H1. And now I've got my forecast, and I can conditionally format it, and I can see now that my checkbook is going to look pretty darn good after a while. So right there, imported a bunch of flat files. I can go into Power Query next month after I've loaded my additional month's export here, and all I have to do is just refresh this query. So this is I thought this was a very good use of the tool. Right here you can refresh it. Now scraping off of the web. Now I wouldn't do Power Query justice if I didn't do at least one scrape off of the web. So I'm going to do that real quick. Go into my other demo folder. Okay. So, whoops. Okay, so I've got a demo that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, and it's a ski resort demo. And the scenario is that I want to know where I'm going to go to ski next year. So I pinged all my Facebook friends and asked them what they look for when they go to a ski resort. Do they look at weather conditions? Do they look at traffic? Do they look at pricing? What is it that they look at? So one of the things, obviously, that everybody unanimously said was like, yeah, traffic conditions. We want to look and see before we go somewhere that everything's clear. Now this is like the scenario. You're sitting there on the couch and you go, oh, I want to go to a ski resort. This is not like I'm going to plan in advance, of course, because I'm going to look at live CHP statistics. But the point of this demo is, here's the California Highway Patrol website, and how am I going to scrape this information off of this page? I want this data in my analysis. So you've probably already seen, and I'll just do it again. the demo by Brian Knight and Devin Knight in their Power Query sessions. If you search on training on the T's for Power Query, their webinars will come up. But I'll go from web, and I already copied the URL. This is an API call out to the website, or a parameter URL. I don't think it's an API. But here, what it does is it's looking for the data. Now, before I go into the details of this URL, let me just go ahead and show you how I go ahead and load this. So I click on the table that I want to load it, and I have a couple other Power Query queries in there that kind of give away the demo, but for some of you, but for those of you that have never worked with this technology before, so this is great. This is telling me, US 101 closure, Santa Maria. So this is the Santa Barbara area. But I wanted what you can also do with Power Query is you can also use functions. And what a function will allow you to do is you'll be able to call this URL and be able to dynamically change this last part of the string to match each code that I have in here. So each of these traffic centers has these codes. Now, how did I figure that out? Well, I went into the source of this website and found this small nugget for the selection menu of the CHP traffic website, and I just copied all these codes. And lo and behold, anything that any code that I enter in and import it with Power Query, it'll be that area's CHP information. But I want all of it. I want the entire state of California because I have an analysis to do. I can go anywhere, and I want to know what the traffic conditions are right now. So what I do is I import this table into Power Query by going into the Power Query tab, and I can insert data into Power Query to start from. Now, this is a table. For those of you not familiar with Excel tables, this table tool design ribbon here, I can assign a table name. I can resize this table, but a table is a really cool thing because it's actually an object inside of Excel. So what I'm doing here by saying from table is I'm importing what you see highlighted here. So I'm going to import this into Power Query, and now you see my data is there, right? I'm going to call this road conditions, and I'm actually skipping a step, road conditions 2, because I think I already have one. What I forgot to do was I forgot to come back into this original query because I have to do something with this in order to make this dynamic. So let me go ahead and edit this, and this is on Devin Knight's blog, what I'm about to show you here, and it's going to be in my show notes. What I'll do is I'm going to look at the advanced editor, and I'm going to make a very small change. Now, hopefully this isn't too over the top, but what I am going to do is I'm going to make this a parameterized Power Query. So this is the syntax. I want to make this a function by putting in that and adding this parameter of CommCenter so that I can switch out the codes, the traffic center codes. So once I do that, now it's a function. It recognizes it as a function. You notice there's an invoke button here. What that means is that it's going to run that function, and it's going to expect a CommCenter parameter. So in this case, I'll just put Sacramento. I know that Sacramento is SACC, and there's something going on in Auburn and in Placerville. Okay, so now that I've got my function, we're going to call this an Angel's function. I'm going to go ahead and apply and close this. And you notice this has some bodies in it, but what I want to do is I want to reuse this function in my imported table of road conditions 2. Now, let me go ahead and get rid of this. Delete. You're looking at me interface with the workbook query interface. This is like a, a solution explorer for those of you familiar with Visual Studio. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete this. Those are the ones that I had in there before. I have to clear them out. Okay, so row conditions 2. So what I want to do is I want to, even though that's a linked table, I want to go in and edit this guy. So I'm going to edit here. And now I'm going to insert a column. And what this column, here's the syntax I'll throw at you guys, okay? So fn angels function, that's my function, that's the one, and I have to put this, it's complaining about a literal, so I got to put in my double quotes. I'm going to put in the code. That's the code from, my link table here. That's the column. So I've got 2 columns. I want the code because that's what dynamically changes my Power Query. And I click OK. Oh, and of course I've got an error. And I think I know why. Because this this actually should not be invoked. Huh. So you guys are seeing me mess up. So that function better be there in order for this to work, because otherwise it's invoked, it has a value in it already, and it's not going to work. So now that I have that fixed, now instead of seeing an error, I see a table. Now this is different from the other example. The other example you saw binaries here. Now a table is cool because there's data in there. If you can see, if I click on every table, you'll see the stuff that it's got data in there. So how do I get this to expand? I just hit this expand button. I have the options of what do I want to expand. I want everything. And there you go. Now I have some null values here. That's because capital doesn't have any traffic information. So I'm going to get rid of those nulls. Again, you can filter dynamically, and it'll save all the steps. So I'm filtering the rows. Now the next time I run this, that doesn't mean that capital is excluded. That just means that if there's any nulls in this custom area column, then it's going to exclude those. So if there's no traffic in Sacramento, then it'll just exclude it the next time I refresh. So I go ahead and click apply and close, and now I've got a nice data set. Again, it looped through all of my comm centers, and I created a function that goes out and queries the CHP website. Okay, so I hope some of you have a practical use for this. It's a very good, I think it's a very cool tool. There's also, Devin Knight has a blog post on how to scrape NFL data going across pages of the NFL website. So definitely if you have to page over multiple pages of tables, you can definitely accomplish this same type of parameterized query over pages of web data instead of just calling a different parameterized URL every time. Okay, so those are those examples. Now let's go into kind of the finished product of why I use that CHP data. Now I've got here a lot of different data that I've scraped off of the web. Some of it's highlighted here, you can see, but I've got it in my model, in my Power Pivot model, which I'll talk about in a little bit. What I want to show you guys is how you can do maps, how you can do slicers inside of Power View, and I'm kind of skipping a step here in the Power Pivot model, but I want to just show you. Not having any database whatsoever, I was able to scrape information off of the web to further analyze it inside of Power View. Now, to get to this window, I went to Insert, and I went into Power View. And this inserts a Power View report. And now I can go to town. Now I've got all my Power View fields here, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to look at a map of where all of these ski resorts are by ski area. So I'm going to bring in ski acres because I want to know which ones are the biggest ones, and I want to know where they're at. So I have a latitude and longitude field here, and I want to know the ski area name. So like on the map, I want it to display the name of the ski resort. So this is in a tabular format, but I want to change it to a map. So I have my design ribbon here. I just plug in map, and now I've got to fix some things because it didn't do exactly what I think I wanted it to do. So size of ski acres. It thought the ski area name was the color, which is kind of looking nice, but it doesn't really show the location. So that this is my location, and the reason I want ski area name in the locations is obviously so I can see, which one of these guys is which. So there's Mount Shasta, and lo and behold, Bakersfield has a ski resort. I had no idea. Alta Sierra. So that's fine, but this isn't telling me much. It's just telling me where these are and how big they are. But what I can do, and one of the tips I have in my slide deck, is how to encode this stuff with color. So to encode it with color, what I want to do is set aside the traffic the traffic centers. So I've got that traffic data from CHP. I'm going to go ahead and bring in traffic center. Now, after playing with this for a little while, this is how I came up with this visualization, and I'll show you here why. So the reason I did it this way, and notice I don't have all the traffic centers here. I had to do a special mapping table to map the location of each ski resort and match it up with a traffic center. So I did that here. Again, I'll include this spreadsheet, this report, this model. All of these things will be included as an attachment. So the other tip I want to share with you guys on PowerView, if I'm analyzing this data and I'm trying to look at every region, I can zoom in with my mouse, and look at things, what's going on to try to get the detail. But there's a better way. So with slicers, you're able to zoom around on this map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom by traffic center. So notice I had to select out here. You didn't see me do it, but I clicked out in the design space, and now I'm going to select traffic center. So what that does, it brings them all up, but now I'm going to change traffic center. Instead of just being a list like this, I'm going to make it a slicer by clicking on the slicer. Okay. What that allows me to do now is, so if I want to zoom in on Sacramento, I can do that. Or if I want to see that single, oh, didn't do it that time. Sometimes you got to do it more than once. It's a little bug of PowerView. But so now I see the ones in Los Angeles. Lo and behold, there's Big Bear, okay, Wrightwood, or what is this one called? Mountain High Resort. There's a little tiny one here called Buckhorn Ski Club, Ski Acre Zero. That might just be messy data. Okay, so okay, this is all well and good, right? But what about that traffic data that I got? So what I'll do is now I'm going to get rid of that, get rid of the filter, and it zooms back out for me. Now I want to include my traffic data, which I have road conditions California. It's all here. I'm going to again click out into the design area. I'm going to click I'll just start clicking stuff and bringing everything in, seeing what I might be interested in. So time, and as you see me do this, you see me, manipulate what a table might look like. That text is also very big, so I want to reduce, the size of that. This one's also kind of big. Sorry. So I select out here, reduce it, take here. Okay. Now, the other tip I want to share with you guys about PowerView is that the titles, to me, I think, just totally suck. Not that they suck, but I mean, it's good when you first see it. It's like, oh yeah, that's ski acres by ski area, blah, blah, blah. But what I like to do is I like to just get rid of the titles, and I'll put in my own, because I think I can name. To me, naming conventions are very, very important. So where's my text box? I'll add a text box. The other thing I'll do too is a lot of people that demo this will use the default title. I never do because it takes up a ton of real estate. So I put in the text box. Where'd it go? Okay. So I'll put in resort location, or maybe even a better term is resort map. The other thing I'll do that I liked on the finished product, which I'll show you here in a second, is I labeled the slicer to say it was a slicer, but that it will zoom. So again, I'm telling people what to do with the interactivity that this tool offers, right? And then I got my traffic data down here. Record number, I don't want to bring that in. What else do I have in there? Oh, traffic incident type. Oh, yeah, that's very important. An area? What was area? Oh, yeah, definitely area. Okay, so what you'll start to see, right, when I go into Los Angeles, and again, you have to click on it a couple times. I don't know why, but now it starts to zoom, okay? And here, what I want to do is I want to say Sacramento and Truckies because there's traffic conditions that affect both regions. So we've got 50 that goes out to, you know, this area, and then we got 80 that goes out to the rest of Lake Tahoe. So if I want to just look at the Truckee area, I click it on the legend, and now it's filtered here and it's filtered here. So not only does the slicer help me narrow my point of view, I've got other ways I can slice by using the legends. So these legends, well, my advice is to color code them. And what did I do to color code it? I added the same thing that I added as a slicer here in the color of, and they refer to that as encoding. So I'm encoding it with color. Okay. Okay. Now the actual finished product of this has a little bit more information. So I've got my pricing here from 2012 that I scraped off of the internet, but the same basic premise, right? I got Truckee, everything else highlights. I've got Sacramento, everything highlights. I think I have to click LA more than once. Nope, it's zoomed for me that time. These maps, I guess another tip is also, I would also, you know, just pick the right background that works for you, that works with the rest of the visualization. Another thing is this background image, I just did it for Flash, but, you know, in order to, you know, for reports that you're going to distribute out to people, I don't suggest putting background images and all that kind of stuff because it just detracts from your message. Okay, but definitely, you know, use your own titles. The other title I'm missing is traffic conditions. Again, nothing against the titles. You know, Power View, they do that obviously because if you're working with the tool for the first time, how do you know what the data is that you're looking at? But here, you know, I have to name this tab. You know, I'm going to name this Ski Resort Plan, you know, and I know I'm looking at where I want to go. I know I've got this to slice on, and I've got my traffic conditions. So, you know, nomenclature is everything. Business analyst, data analyst, you know what I'm talking about. So there you go. All right, so let's go back because I want to talk a little bit more about this stuff. Now that you kind of got a feel for this stuff, and I might skip, Andrew, are you on the line by chance? No. Okay, so I might go solo. So what I want to talk about here is, you know, when do you leverage Power Query and when do you leverage Power Pivot? And this is where the BI developers, and so I might get some comments on this, but this is the way I guess Angel sees it. Because Power Query really is a data set shaper, you know. I really am interested to analyze what Power Query introduces to an analyst of not just, you know, Excel users, but also Tableau users. Tableau has its own Excel add-in, but I think Power Query gives it a run for its money. So if you need a single data set, which a lot of people do, a lot of people have, Power Query is where you should maybe be looking first. And it's primo for non-database data sources. I mean, you saw me import from the web, right? You can import stuff from Facebook, from SharePoint, from other APIs, Zillow, from, I think Brian showed how to import data from Yelp. Like I said, Devin imported data from NFL. The thing I thought was really slick was importing multiple flat files. Man, if I had that 3 years ago, I would have looked like a rock star. The other thing that I didn't really show too, which I do have something I use, but it's for work, is importing XML. So for all my team's timesheet data, we use a SaaS provider, and they provide an XML, a link that you can download an XML from. Well, guess what? I can just put that link into Power Query and now refresh it, and instantly inside of my Excel workbook, I have a way to look at all the time what my guys have spent doing, the comments, are they off or whatever. JSON is also the Power Query is very JSON friendly. Now, I haven't used Hadoop or Windows Azure Blob Storage with Power Query, but if it's as easy as it is for importing flat files or XML or JSON, it's going to be good. You can also do creative transformations, and again, I'll refer you back to Devin Knight's talk that he did on Power Query, where he did an example of unpivot, and I did an example of a parameterized query. Use that for what it is. It's just an example. There's so much more you can probably do with that. And so I encourage you guys to go out and get Chris Webb's book. He just published it. It's on Amazon. I got the Kindle version. I think it was like $25 or something. So that's out there. So there's help. And if you want to get fancy with the M language, you can. What I don't recommend Power Query for is database tables or queries. I recommend Power Pivot instead. Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't. You absolutely can, and they have built that functionality in. But the reason I don't recommend it, at least for right now, is because you can leverage more with Power Pivot if you're talking about database tables and queries. The other reason is if you're using Office 365 and you're thinking about using Power BI, any custom SQL you might want to write in the future is not refreshable in Office 365. Just raw tables and views. Now, that might change, but what I encourage you guys to think about is how many hops does it take to do your analysis. So if you've got a Power Query running and then you import that into Power Pivot, now if you want to change things, you got to remember to go into Power Query, not Power Pivot. Now, there's a lot of powers there, right? So you got to be careful. And my best practice is always just keep it simple, just as simple as possible. So this is a reason I do it. I might get some comments. Again, I don't mind responding. I'm always learning from other people, but that's the way I kind of see it, as well as SSAS. I didn't see anywhere where you can import it into Power Query. That doesn't mean you can't. I just don't know how. And on a particular engagement, we worked a lot with Power Pivot to interface with analysis services so that we could do things like ORs, which is one of the things that I was going to talk about later. Let me get through this real quick. I'm running out of time. Power Pivot. So very good for when you got a database, especially when you have a data warehouse or a data mart. You can also connect to a cube. There was a question on one of the questions that came through on Devin Knight's talk was, can I use these tools to interface with disparate cubes? You've got maybe multiple cubes out there. Well, Power Pivot is a good option because it can connect it directly to analysis services, each one of those things, and you can join them however which way as long as you have a matching relationship. But I also don't want to take away from Power Query the fact that you can merge queries. So the reason I say if you're relating more than 2 data tables for a pivot table, so that's the key, right? Power Query, we're interested in sets. But Power Pivot, the way we're going to analyze that data is through a pivot table or a Power View report, and it's got it. And by Power View, you're instantly, it's the same paradigm. It's the pivot table paradigm. You're going to pivot the data. So with Power Query, you're not going to, you're going to dump that onto a set, and I want to leave it at that because that leaves opportunities for our non-Microsoft folks to use Power Query that might be plugging that data into something else like ClickView, Tableau, MicroStrategy, whatever, right? They can use Power Query for very quick analysis or very quick data set generation, but Power Pivot is, you want to create a pivot table, and I'm going to show some of that right now. Okay, so real quick, as fast as I can go. So the reason I'm talking about ORs in self-service BI is because you can do ORs inside of Power View. You can do an if in a single field, like in my case in traffic centers, I can group things by traffic center. If it's Sacramento or if it's Truckee, either or, then show it to me. But what I can't do is I can't say if it's Sacramento, the traffic center, or if the acreage is greater than 50. I can't do ORs across columns inside of Power View in the filter selection. So this is a big argument from folks that use Cognos or Business Objects Webby because they're able to do that. They're able to do those ORs. This is also something that comes up with people that might be looking to transfer to SSRS from those tools. Now, what we figured out is the best and probably the easiest way is just to bring in the data in Power Pivot, create a calculated column with your OR condition so that you can filter on it. And that will take care of your ORs. So, and that works for cubes, that works for databases, data warehouses, flat files, you name it. So, the paradigm, I guess, in Power BI is with the data model is you have to dial in your data model. Okay. There's a couple other things I want to go through. So let me go ahead and open that demo as fast as I can. EventWorks Internet Sales Demo. Okay. So here what I'm connected here to Power Pivot. Now Power Pivot has a different ribbon. You can find a ton of resources online for Power Pivot. I'm going to go into the Power Pivot Management window, which is the Power Pivot window. This is where the Power Pivot magic happens. So, I can import from a bunch of different things, but in this case, if I look at my existing connections, I'm connected to my local host database, and specifically AdventureWorks DW 2012. Excuse me. So here I've created already a bunch of relationships, or maybe more appropriately said, I didn't create a single relationship because foreign keys were already set up for me. So that's actually something key that I should at least mention on this webinar is I used to think foreign keys were, in a data warehousing scenario, were not very helpful, especially since Parallel Data Warehouse doesn't have foreign keys. So I'm like, why, in a small data set if it doesn't really help in a large data set. But the fact of the matter is when you're doing an analysis like in Power Pivot or Power Query, it actually helps. It actually helps because it automatically does relationships for you. You don't really have to think about it, and that might help your users. But just something to think about. So what I'm going to demonstrate with this demo real quick is how to create a disconnected slicer. Now I have Rob Colley to thank for this idea. He has a great book out there, and I'll put a link in the show notes for that. But what I'm showing here is the sales amount in the pivot chart and the pivot table. But what about if I want to swap this value? I don't want to put another value next to it. I want to just swap it out completely on both charts. Maybe I'm doing recognized revenue and gross revenue or something. I don't know. But it is possible by adding another table to the model. So sort of similar to Power Query, I created another table, and I can bring in this table by adding it to the data model. You see here, it's the option right there. Okay, so I'm going to add that to the data model, and in doing so, I'm just going to leave it as a non-related table. Okay, let me go through this real quick. So I'm going to go to this table because what I want to do is I want to add a measure. Now, this is the Power Pivot window. For those of you that are not familiar, I've got my data here from whatever source. and I can add columns, but I'm not going to do any of that. All I'm going to do is I'm going to add a default metric, which I have a cheat sheet here. Excuse me. Okay, so all this is doing is if none of the measures are selected, this metric, this default right here is going to give me the first one, which is sales amount. So if you want, so the tip here is ID1 has to be the default. So now I'm going to go to the fact table, to the table where I have my measures, my real measures defined that I want to swap. I've got a few that I can select here: sales amount, tax amount, and discount. I should have probably put margin, but I didn't have that when I created it. So when I created this little cheat sheet, so I'm going to just go ahead and plug this in real quick and go back to that demo. Whoops, Power Pivot window. Add it here. Okay. Now, for those of you who are curious, this is a switch function. This is called DAX. This formula language here. It's very Excel-like. So all I'm saying is, if by my slicer that I'm about to add into my dashboard, my Excel dashboard, if I pick sales amount, then show sales amount. If I pick tax, then show tax, discount, so forth, so on. So I hit enter. Make sure I don't get any errors. I'm going to format this. Okay, save. 4 minutes, man. I want to show you guys time series forecasting. So then I'm going to go back to my sales analysis. Okay, so now what does this mean? Now what this means is I want to take sales amount out of here, and for my pivot chart, I want to take sales amount out of there, because I want to pick now this new metric that I have called selected metric. And down here, I've got selected metric. Okay, by default, this is showing sales amount because of that default metric calculation that I have in my metrics table. But I want to slice and dice by that, so this is kind of killing two birds with one stone. A lot of us that I see out there in practice don't use slicers, and I think they're a lot of fun. So I'm going to put in a slicer here, and this is going to be, lo and behold, my metrics. Okay, and I'm going to add this as columns because I'm trying to format it to match the rest of my dashboard. Now, you notice here this font size is bigger than this font size. Well, it's because I actually created a custom style, which is what you have to do. You can duplicate a style and modify it, and that's what I did. I modified the properties of this slicer. So now I can bring it up here. Okay, so if I want sales amount, now nothing's going to change. Obviously, that's a bad selection. But if I want tax amount, both things change. Or did they? No. Oh, this brings up another thing. So the reason that it's affecting my table down here and not my chart is because of the report connections. So slicers have options, just like charts have options, just like pivot tables have options. So I click on my slicer, go to the options, and I go to my report connections, and I realize that I'm not changing this chart on this diagram, or this dashboard. So tax amount, now both things change. I don't know if you caught it, but this scale here changed. Obviously my scales are weird, or it appears that the thing is not changing. The other thing I want to call out is this timeline. So the timeline, this is a very cool visualization because, or a filter, because now I can select, months or quarters or years. And on an engagement where we had this requirement where the person wanted to be able to slice by whatever in the filter without having to drag and drop the quarters, remove the quarters, drag and drop the months, remove the months, now you can just, go back and forth. It's really easy. It's really nice. Okay. Okay, 1 minute. Rachel, can I go over? Can I get 5 minutes or?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Go ahead.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry. So what I wanted to show you guys real quick in this last minute, Andrew, you're still not online, right? Okay. What I'm going to show you guys in this last minute is I created a finished product, of course I cheated, right, of that dashboard. So this internet sales demo has other visualizations, other Power BI visualizations. So it has this, oh, of course it breaks. Refresh for me. Come on. There we go. Okay, so regional sales. I created, in Power Pivot, you can specify image columns. This is by going into the Power Pivot window, into sales territory, going to the design tab, going to the table, not the table properties, I'm sorry, going into the advanced tab, the table behavior, and selecting what the default image is for the table. When you do that, then you can look at these these images here, and this is a tile visualization. You notice I've got tile by here, and I've got a scatter plot down here. Again, go to Devin Knight's webinar before you, if you want to go hit Slick on creating some really cool scatter plots. He's got a great webinar on that. If I go to the buy sales analysis, now this is the one I want to show you. So I've got a time series forecast, or time, oh, I gave it away. Shoot. I got my time series chart down here, and I've got my categorization of all the products that are in sales, right? Sales amount by model name and category. There's the title that I love and hate at the same time. So if I click on, this filter, let me bring it to the front. This all filters, right? Really nice. I can look at touring and everything updates. Okay, great. So now let me show you the cool stuff. So if you publish this to Office 365, what you'll be able to do in Office 365 now is you'll be able to not only tell what the sales were all these months for this given model name, for this category, you will be able to forecast out to try to predict what your forecast is going to look like in the future. So let me show you that. They demonstrated this capability in at the Business Analytics Conference last May, and it was really, really cool. So I'll go into my internet sales report. Now again, this is an extra I wanted to put in here because I thought it's good. I don't see it really talked about a lot, and I want to learn more about it, which is why I was going to bring my principal data scientist on the call, but he's not available. So we go to the. Oh, there you go. Hey, Andrew. Okay. All right. Let me do the show, and then maybe we can, if people have questions, they can ask. So I've got this is in Silverlight right now. So there's a lot that I'm covering here, I realize. But this button down here, if you see the little, it says that you can try the new HTML5 version. When I try the HTML5 version, what that does is it now exposes this little caret. If you expand that caret, you'll see that you can expand that time series forecast out to future months. This is data that's not in my data set, okay? So then I vary a couple of things over here, the confidence interval, so I can see the range of how good or what the limits of this forecast would look like given these different values. And the seasonality, I can make this look a little bit better, or I'm not making it look better. I'm experimenting with these variables here to see how well I trust this forecast. Now this is not done. I can actually go into the model names and look at how this forecast changes as well, right? So. Andrew, would you have any cautions about doing that, about what I'm doing here, or any suggestions?
A number of suggestions. One thing to notice is as Angel clicks around on the various bike models, you can see the model and the forecast changes drastically, whether you're looking at all the data or just, say, one of the bins. So here he's looking at all the data, and you would click on one of the road bikes earlier, where you can see the model sort of dominated by your biggest sellers. and that even though those might be going up, the less popular bikes seem to be trending downward. So much like anything, when you're doing your data analysis, you have to understand what is going in. This isn't a magic wand that you can wave and make it all work. You need to know what you're doing and what your inputs are. Much like your everyday life, you can cover up important trends by looking at all the data instead of different slices and dice. So just one thing to watch out for.
Yeah, perfect. Great point. Great point. Rachel, do we want to take questions, or is that all the time we have?
We can take a couple questions. There's actually not that many, so we can probably get through them. One of the questions is, how do you set up the date filter in Excel that you just showed?
Which filter?
The date filter?
Good question. So in the Power Pivot model, all you have to do is there's two things. One, I'll use this date dimension as an example. You have to have a date column. That's first what you have to do. So one column marked as a date, and then the other is that it has to be unhidden. So if you see here, I've hidden a number of columns in this dimension. I had to unhide this to be able to expose it. So if I go back to my pivot table or my dashboard here, if I want to insert a timeline, not a slicer, but a timeline, I click on that, and I can look at all the fields that I can put in as a timeline, and full date alternate key is there, as well as a few others. And when I do that, that's what brings it in.
Okay, great. And I think we only have time for one more question, but it is, how do we use Power Query to feed into Power Pivot directly?
Oh, good question. So you edit the query. So let me go back to a CHP data example. And here's this query. If I edit this, I see a couple options here down here at the bottom. Here's the data model. That's the Power Pivot. So what is supposedly happening when you load data into Power Query now is that load a worksheet. Obviously, worksheets are limited in 2013 to only go up to, like, I think it's 1 million rows. So if your Power Query data set exceeds that, it automatically unchecks this box and it checks this one, so that it automatically goes to the data model, because the data model can handle many millions of rows. So this is how you do it. I hope all of you guys had a good session. I really hope you guys can take some of this, any nugget of this, and use it and apply it in your companies. That's my goal. So
yeah, that was great, Angel.
Yeah, and let me know. I'm on Twitter @AngelStreamline. Let me know if you guys had used it. That would be great feedback for me.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. It was awesome. We always love having you here for our free training on the T's. So thank you very much.
No problem, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your week.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.